So welcome to Family Matters with Reese Law. We are a family law firm based in Fairfax with an office in Prince William County and serve the Northern Virginia area. In episode 17 of our podcast, we will be talking with Ann Dolin. Ann has a degree in child psychology and a master's in special education. She is a former public school teacher, mother of two, author, and advocate for children with ADHD and learning issues. She founded Educational Connections in 1998, tutoring one student at her dining room table. Today, her company has grown to employ 120 tutors, executive function coaches, and college consultants who provide virtual support from K to 12 and college students in the DC area and beyond. Hi, Ann. Thank you for being our guest today and sharing your knowledge with us.
Thanks so much for having me, Kate. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. So divorced or not, having two households or one, how do you get a child to do their homework, which is an issue in every household, without harming your relationship with the child? You don't want to become the nag, but it needs to get done. Do you have any advice for us?
The easiest thing I can think of that both parents can do, whether the kids are living together under one roof with two parents or if they're separate, is to have a routine. And a routine is a little bit different from a schedule. To me, a schedule means that homework is going to start at the same time every day, say 4 o'clock, Monday through Thursday. But this is Northern Virginia. And the reality is everybody's busy and that's never going to happen. But you can have a routine. Mm-hmm. Homework starts about half hour after you get home. What we know is that most kids need some downtime after school. And for many students, that half hour break is really helpful just to kind of unwind. But the routine is whether you get home at, 3:30 or you're in aftercare and one parent picks you up at 6 o'clock, you still get that half hour of downtime. And then the expectation is that homework starts. So it could be that you set a timer. It could be that, as kids get into the routine, you can just give a reminder 5 minutes before and then when it's time to start homework. But the idea is that when kids do something day in and day out, they have that routine of this is when it starts, it's much easier. And I've found that having a start time is more important than delegating an end time, which is honestly what most of us do. We say your work has to be done by, 10 o'clock at night or 8 o'clock, whenever it is. But it's actually better to start it out earlier on the front end than mandating an end time.
Right. And homework after dinner can be really hard and they're tired and it might be what has to happen in a particular household. But there's always a routine that can be found in between the time.
Yeah, it's true. For sure, Kate. There is a routine. And, there's lots of times kids can do homework. They can do it right after school, after about that 30-minute break that I talked about, before dinner, after dinner, before bed. Kids always remind me that they can do it in the morning when they get up, on the bus to school, in the class right before that class starts, that they have to turn it in. But ideally, for older kids are going to want to start work later. That's just kind of their body clock. They just get a second wind later at night. So even if we can get them into the routine of just cracking it open, the books open, or opening their laptop before dinner or right after dinner, and you ask the questions, what do you have tonight? And that kind of gets their brains thinking about what do they have? Because once you get in that mindset, it's a little bit easier to start. And so having that discussion around homework, even if it's at dinner or right after dinner, can be really helpful.
Now, sometimes homework can be sporadic where they won't have homework every night. How do you keep the routine?
You can still have the same routine. And, you can use that as, I call it designated homework time. And designated homework time is really helpful, especially for young kids, in this era of limited to no homework. And what I see in the Northern Virginia area is that many public schools and elementary school have done away with homework, or they give very little in 5th and 6th grade, but nothing to younger kids. It's different in Catholic schools, I would say. Kids do have a good amount of homework. Some private schools give homework. But in most cases, homework doesn't really start until middle school and definitely into high school. And so there's also lots of research on homework. We know that When kids are young, up until about 5th grade, it doesn't have a significant impact on academic performance and standardized test scores. However, after 5th grade, it starts to matter a lot. And in high school, kids should be having homework. The optimal amount of time to spend on homework is about an hour and a half. Anything more than that is kind of like you reach the point of diminishing returns. But in general, if your child has no homework, use that time as designated homework time, and they can read a book. They can practice math facts if they're young. They can get ahead and study for a quiz or a test or something that's coming up. But you might make that designated homework time, only 20 minutes long. Whether they say they have homework or not, there's always something kids could be doing.
Okay. Are there any communication styles or skills that you suggest to make schoolwork less of a conflict?
Well, certainly, especially in homes where kids are, not with the same parent every day, what I found is that inevitably one parent is going to be better at homework than the other parent. And it sometimes kind of stinks if you're that one parent who's really good at these things, because you want the other parent to be carrying their weight. But it's been my experience that, it kind of is like that, even in intact families. And what I found is that if you can have the same kind of dialogue with your child, that can be really helpful. So you can have that routine, as I talked about, but you can also ask questions instead of, do you have homework? Which sometimes kids will say, no, I don't have anything. And they really do. You can ask, tell me about your priorities tonight. What's the one thing that you want to get done? And this is especially helpful in older kids, as they have more and more work and feel anxious, like they have so much going on, helping them to boil it down and think about, what's that one thing? If I got this one thing done, I'd feel really good about myself. Or you might say, what are your priorities tonight? And in a perfect world, your daughter would say, well, let's see, gee, Mom, I have that geometry test to study for tomorrow. I can't forget that lab in chemistry. And I also need to work on my English essay. That's not going to happen in reality, but it might get your daughter or son's head thinking, oh, what do I have tonight? What do I need to do first? What do I need to do second? What might I do third? And those skills of planning ahead and prioritizing are called executive function skills, and they're critical for school success. So that's one type of piece of language both parents can be asking that will put them on the same page with their kids.
Excellent. Have you found that there are ways to improve the parent-child bond when addressing homework and school-related subjects, whether it's the math club or the school dance? Some children just have discomfort with school, don't they?
They sure do. And they especially have discomfort when something feels hard or arduous. And we see this a lot in cumulative subjects where one skill builds upon another. In my practice, we work with kids from kindergarten through college, but I will say, sometimes kids have those executive function issues. Sometimes they have subject issues. And when that happens, it's usually in classes like math and math-based science as they get older, chemistry, physics, or a foreign language, because if your foundation is shaky, anything else above that is going to feel really hard for you. So if your child gets stuck during homework, let's say it's math, because everybody can relate to that, and they're super frustrated, you can run in and fix the problem and tell them how to do it. And in fact, there's 3 things you can do when your child's stuck. You can say, this is your homework, not mine. I already went to 5th grade. You do this. But that's not always a great way of approaching it, because you want your child to come to you later on if they are having difficulties. You could say, this is how you do it. Let me show you how. And honestly, the way we learned how to do it, Kate, is completely different than kids do math these days.
I've heard, and I wouldn't touch today's math under any circumstances because I would not know what I was doing.
I don't blame you. And so in those cases, the student usually says, that's not how Mrs. Smith says to do it. Or you could say, oh, you know what? You're right. This is hard. Are there examples in your book? Do you have notes on this that you took in class today? In that way, you're getting your child to refer back to, the way that they learned how to do it in school. And it also puts the ball in their court. It gives them a little bit of responsibility instead of you trying to fix it as a parent. So I always find that approach is super helpful.
Excellent. Now, there's technology for every imaginable purpose at this point. Is there anything particular or that you have used successfully with children of varying ages that are available to help with organizational skills? Because it seems like organization can be a huge barrier. And when you see that notebook where there's papers hanging out left and right, you're like, is this child organized enough to know where they wrote the note about the English homework? So
yeah, it's so true. I've seen that with the pandemic and schools really being forced to put things online, that those super disorganized kids are still disorganized, but they're not as bad now because they don't have to find things. They don't have to dig through their backpack. If they left it at home, they're out of luck because most things are digital. But what I have found is that those same kids are not good about keeping neat digital files. And, in my practice, we'll say, oh, show me what you have going on. They'll open up their laptop and their home screen is cluttered with different documents all over the place. And so a couple things that we found to be super helpful to kids. Number one is that planning aspect we talked about earlier. And most school systems now have software instead of, them writing down the assignment from the board. The assignment, the teachers will post it online, and hopefully they do. I say that teachers have gotten better at this, not perfect. But in many cases, that those assignments will populate onto a calendar. So kids can open their calendar and see, oh, on Friday I have this geometry test. On Tuesday I have this lab due. On Wednesday I have this biography that I have to finish reading. And so from there, we work with kids to take those bigger due dates and break them down into smaller chunks and put those little chunks of to-dos on their calendar. And what we found is that using the calendar, we call this skill calendaring, is actually way better for kids than list making. But as adults, we like list making. So sometimes we push that on our kids and we say, just make a list. But I haven't found that that's as successful for kids than calendaring and using Google Calendar or another calendar that they're familiar with.
Well, it lays it out as to the importance of what due date is when, I'm sure, in a visual way that the list is not helpful, but the calendar would be significantly. Yeah. And we do have some kids, I'd say girls more than boys, that are list makers and that still do like lists. But in general, we found that, once we can teach kids how to use the calendar, especially in high school, it's really powerful because once they go off to college, their life is that calendar. And, at the beginning of college, we help them take a look at each syllabus and put those big dates into their calendar. So everything's there. And we found that helps them to feel so much better in the beginning of the school year because they've got everything out instead of, feeling like, I don't know when stuff is due. Everything's in one central place. Right. And not to mention being able to take a big project and parsing it down to manageable bites that can be done and, over a few weeks, if that's when the project's due or however much time the child might have. So that would be really useful as well to always have that in the plan on a longer term project. I would venture to guess. Yeah. Sure. So how can the right organizational tools help? What do they do best? I heard of something called Forest.
Yes, I love Forest. Forest is an app for your phone. And one of the issues that kids have now that we didn't have when we were students is constant distractions, alerts, text messages, all these things that are beeping and buzzing in the background. And it's just so addicting when you're doing your homework and your phone is nearby and you hear a ding to want to check your phone. What the research has found for kids is that your phone really shouldn't be in your workspace. Ideally, you're going to focus best if your phone is in another room and you take what's called a tech break. And a tech break is when you work on something for about 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes, and then you physically have to get up, go check your phone, respond to a Snapchat, whatever it is, put your phone back and work again. But the reality is, if you're a parent, some of your kids are just never going to go for that. They're not going to listen to you. So another option is this app you mentioned, Forest. And Forest is cool because when you open the app, you see that the reason it's called Forest is because there's a tree on your home screen. And you set a timer. So say you set it for 20 minutes, this tree will grow on your home screen in the span of 20 minutes. But if at any time you go to Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat or check your text messages, you'll get a warning that says get back to focus. And if you don't, your tree will wither and die. Nobody wants a dead tree because you want your tree planted in your forest because your friends are typically on Forest too. Lots of kids use it and it's super motivating. And so I would say anytime we can use technology like Forest, or for many students, there's other apps. These are in the form of website blockers that kids can use that they can either blacklist or whitelist websites that they only want to go to or don't want to go to for a specific amount of time, kind of like Forest. And no matter what they do, they can try to restart their computer, disable the app, but they can't get to sites that they deem to be distracting, like YouTube. And they have to get their work done. They have to study for their test or finish that reading online. And those types of tools are really helpful to them too.
Excellent. I know that when I was working on my master's, I used a timer because I wanted to get 6 hours of work done on a Saturday and 3 hours done during the work week. And by using a timer, I realized, wow, it takes me 8 hours to get 6 hours done. Because, I'll just throw some laundry in or something along those lines. So, that sounds like a very interesting app. So how can you tell when your child would benefit from tools or help from the parent or from others?
There's a couple ways. Sometimes you'll see your child struggling with things like turning their work on time. Planning ahead. You'll see them do things at the last minute. They seem unaware of when assignments are due. They perpetually procrastinate, or they have a hard time studying. And when we see that, that's a sign that maybe it's those executive function skills that can use a boost, and that would make the biggest impact. Sometimes, though, we see kids that struggle in the basic skills like reading or writing, or a cumulative subject like math or a foreign language. And that means they need a tutor. So sometimes it's an executive function coach, sometimes it's a tutor, and sometimes you're not sure. It seems to be, a little bit of both. But whatever the reason, I would say get professional help, because in many instances, in my experience, kids cannot dig themselves out of a hole. So when we as parents say, just go to your teacher or focus more, try harder, study longer, none of those prompts work for kids. Really, if they get professional help and they have a professional tutor or an executive function coach, they can help to start to steer them in the right direction. That increases their motivation. And then after that, they're much more willing to put forth that effort that they need because they know how.
Excellent. All right. I think you've highlighted nicely that consistency is key to having the child be successful, or at least be on the path to being successful. What do you consider to be a confident learner? How does that present?
A confident learner is somebody that really has control of their academic performance. So a student who comes home from school knows what they have to do and is able to execute on it. So they know that they have these 3 things to do, and they can do it independently, that student is generally a confident learner. A child where as the parent, you're always asking, show me what you have to do. Did you turn in that? Did you do this? Mm-hmm. You have to poke, prod, cajole, give rewards, all those kinds of things to get them to do their work because they're struggling with motivation. That tells me that they're not a confident learner, and that's when they need some extra help.
Gotcha. Well, Ann, I mentioned earlier that you're an author. Could you tell us about the books that are relevant to educating children?
Sure. I've written a number of books. My first book is Homework Made Simple, Tips, Tools, and Solutions for Stress-Free Homework. I actually wrote a book on private schools in the Washington, D.C. area. I've highlighted over 100 private schools in D.C. for parents looking for an alternate to the public school system. And then my newest book out a few years ago is Overcoming Procrastination. And that's for kids that are struggling with those executive function skills.
And available to adults everywhere.
Yeah. I was on this working with a school. Actually, I was doing a teacher training, and the teachers were taking all these notes. They're like, oh, this is so good. I'm totally trying this. I'm like, wait, this is for kids. And, they're like, no, I need this. You don't know. I need this. So there's strategies that can be used for everyone.
There you go. Well, it's very busy around here in Northern Virginia, without question. Thank you so much for joining us today. I've really enjoyed having this conversation, and I think it will help our viewers. Viewers, please subscribe to our podcast channel so you never miss an episode. You can visit our website at www.reeslawoffice.com to get connected to that. You can contact Ann Dolin at her office, 703-934-8282, or Ann, A-N-N, at ectutoring.com, with a website robust with information. Is www.ectutoring.com itself for more information. And we are Reese Law, and we are reachable at, I'm reachable at kate@reeslawoffice.com, and that's Kate with a K and Catherine with a C, because that's how my mother named me. And that's all there is to that. 703-279-5140. Thank you so much for joining us.
This podcast was produced by Heartcast Media.